What's up, guys? We're back with Fire Your Coach. We are moving on. Last time we talked about the difference between more movement-based type movements, barbell-based movements that focus on movement patterns versus isolation type stuff, bodybuilding physique type stuff, and how they kind of come together and the things you need to worry about recovery-wise that are a bit different from one to the other. So now we're going to talk about how you would populate those workouts given your particular needs, given where you are on the spectrum, how blended you want it to be, from barbell specific work, strength specific work, to the smaller stuff, working the eye candy, getting the arms bigger, making sure those rear delts pop just right. So we're gonna get into that. Today we're talking about exercise selection, specifically barbell variations, why you would use a particular variation and how you might plug it in, depending on you, your level of advancement, and your goals. Real quick, Big Dreams, Bad Jeans in the Barbell Apparel store below. You can get that along with the other Bromley t-shirts. I appreciate their support so much. They make this channel possible. I appreciate your guys' support as well. So let's get into the lesson. Today, exercise selection. So assuming we're doing barbell strength work, we're not gonna question it. We're not gonna reinvent the wheel. There's a reason barbells persist as the backbone of all strength and athletic programs, with very few exceptions. There's always the outliers, the kids that are too cool for school that need to do their own thing and reinvent the wheel. You know, you want to go play around with kettlebells. That's great. Great way to exercise, get stronger. There's so many other things you can do that will give you a healthy, useful body. But if you want to optimize muscle mass, force output, if you want an easy, simple, scalable, like predictable model, the barbell is going to be what it is. So we have our pillars, essentially our main movement patterns we went over: a squat, a horizontal push in the form of a bench, a deadlift, which is a hinge, an overhead press for the vertical push, and then a row, which is a pull. And you could be nitpicky and say a vertical row as well, like a pull up, lat, pull down, chin. But all of these are contested in some fashion. This is accessory. So we're not going to get too much into it. A barbell only program, you would do well to just have rows in twice a week and progress it. You're going to grow your posterior, I promise you. So the reasons you might change range from hypertrophy, targeting a specific weak point. If you know that you've been executing this movement with like just pristine precision for many years, and you find that no matter what you do, no matter how strong you get, no matter how prepared you are, you always get stuck at that one point. This is the one thing that always breaks down, and it costs you that lift, and you feel like you're leaving 50 pounds on the table if it wasn't for that one thing. There's so many reasons you would do it, and we're gonna try to cover most of them. There is a lot of carryover, and don't come into this thinking you need to be surgical. This is information to take in. Your brain will sort it and apply it where needed at the end of this. You're not going to really be dealing with your exercise selection the way a surgeon tries to operate on a brain. It doesn't work that way, so don't look at this like it's very daunting. The cool thing is that there is so much overlap. It really does make for a lot of right answers regardless of what you pick. It's really hard to get outside the lines on this. But generally, if you start out with something like greater range of motion, that's one of the easiest changes you can make, one of the easiest variations to a barbell movement. That's just physically taking the bar farther than it would otherwise, which means the joints are going to be experiencing more range of motion. Muscles are going to be stretched more. You're going to be taken into ranges that might be better for hypertrophy, or it might be better just because you're not used to it, which represents some quick and easy growth. So high bar squats, just being a little more upright, a little more disadvantaged, taking the bar a bit lower and deeper. It'd be like benching with a camber bar, so somewhat of a deficit. A deficit deadlift's a great example. Going all the way down to your collarbone on an overhead, which I like never do. I'm always like right here, so there's always room to bring it down lower. Probably wouldn't recommend a deficit overhead press. I think we're reaching a little bit there, but there are different levels you can press to and get a different result there. Camber bar, I mean, they have camber bars with things like seal rows that allow you to pull back a little bit farther. Or you can even emphasize the stretch at the bottom. So those are examples. Great for hypertrophy. You're going to get more range of motion. By definition, there's going to be more time under tension. So we tend to associate greater range with a bunch of things that tend to grow a lot of muscle. And especially if you are a strength-focused athlete, you probably have a competitive version of these lifts that are optimized in some capacity where they're a little more compact, you're a little bit more primed to move weight rather than maximize development. So it makes it a very easy change to kind of make yourself more comfortable. And you also find that when you get really good at a movement that puts you through a position like that where you have to go through more range, under more control, that when you come back to your competition setup or as you work them together, the competition setup feels comfortable, more stable, much, much more secure. So this solves a lot of problems, and that should be a staple in just about everybody's training in some capacity. So another example is focusing purely on time under tension. Now, increasing range does that by default, but you can take it one step further by intentionally moving the weight more slowly, by pausing, not just at the bottom, but at different points. You can pause your bench at the bottom, pause your squat at the bottom. You can pause along the way. The most widely accepted use case for that is deadlifts, where people get really bad stick points. There's a bunch of turnover between yanking the bar off the ground and then being able to finish the lockout. You'll get people that get dead spots mid-shin, right around their knee, right above their knee, and you can pause to create time under tension there. But also tempo, things like tempo squats, bench, pausing, more range of motion, again, more mechanical tension, kind of associated with more hypertrophy. Once again, especially if you're not used to it. Going down to disadvantage movements. Now, all of this counts. It's all disadvantage. Disadvantage means you're not primed to move as much weight as possible. Really, you're primed to move less weight deliberately. Now, there's a really cool thing there. Disadvantage work is not only generally good for hypertrophy and occasionally focusing on weak areas, but disadvantage work is easier to recover from because you are getting a similar growth stress from less total weight on the bar. So if you listen to Renaissance Periodization, Mike Israel's channel, you will hear him talk about fatigue to stimulus ratio. Do you need to beat yourself up and put yourself in that recovery hole in order to get the same growth stress? This is something powerlifters, strength athletes, strongmen really struggle with because everything we think of is more weight, more weight, more weight. And that's definitely useful and it certainly has its place, but it can't be the only answer because there's going to be times where you can't do that. So learning how to disadvantage yourself, give your body a break while still producing similar strength and size gains is huge. So this group, aside from range and time under tension, we're going to look at the bar being in a different position, being a little more awkward, being a leverage disadvantage, so the load being further away from the joint that's moving. So you can look at a front squat or a safety bar squat for a squat because the weight's now shifted in front, which means, one, you can't bend forward, so you have to stay upright. And if that's not how you usually squat, holy hell, is that going to rock your world. But also the weight being in front, special taxation on your upper back, your midsection. Front squats for a lot of people are a magic cure-all with their squat. The way I preach RDLs, not everybody. If you're a real wide stance, kind of long-legged squatter, you hate front squats because they're too awkward for you to get anything out of them. But safety bar is a good alternative because the bow shifts the weight in front of you. Benching, like guillotine or wide or narrow benching, you are putting stress wide, more on the shoulders. The pecs get a greater stretch. Pecs are very disadvantaged there. Close grip, the elbow and the tricep are disadvantaged. Guillotine is really proceed with caution, but elbows high and wide coming down to your neck. Very weak position, but you stretch the hell out of the chest. So if you're careful and you stay light, that's a really useful bench press developmental movement. For deads, I like stiff leg deadlifts. Disadvantage, but it's also more range, more time under tension, just by virtue of changing where your hips go. Good mornings are another one. Behind the neck, one of my favorite for overhead pressing. Everybody hates it. If you have good mobility and if you start appropriately light and you don't get in the habit of piling on too much weight, getting into a shitty position and moving into a spot where you don't have good mobility, this can be a very good exercise for a lot of people. And then rows, like you go wide, like wide is a really easy way to disadvantage yourself at a row. So that's all generally associated with hypertrophy, but also you can pinpoint like a close grip. If I want to work on my triceps, I close grip bench. So you can kind of piece pieces together like that as you consider what you need. Now we get into, these are everybody's favorite. Everybody tends to focus on these. Advantage or overload movements. That's where you get to pile on the weight. You get to feel like Superman. So box squats or pin squats. I find that probably has the least use case. Doesn't mean you can't use it, but if you're trying to optimize your squat, generally people have trouble out of the bottom, which needs work out of the bottom, but specifically skill and positioning out of the bottom. So you need to practice getting in the bottom to have a strong start and to be able to cut through that stick point that happens right out of the hole. Overloading tends to not carry over to that quite as well. It doesn't mean it's not useful, it just doesn't tend to. If you are going to overload, I recommend keeping it right at, if not a little above parallel. But once you get above that, I mean, if you're doing like half squats, that's great. The weight's gonna feel lighter on your back. Your hips aren't gonna be really any better of getting out of the hole. Bench, everybody's favorite. You know, accommodating resistance, of course, applies to this, but like board presses, slingshot, floor presses allow you to overload the top. Trap bar, block pulls, so you're not pulling quite as far. You can handle a lot of weight there. Push presses, one of my favorite overhead press stuff. overhead press movements because it's very advantaged. Croc rows, power rows, I love those for upper back, but not by themselves. Don't just be the guy that does that. Get comfortable with strict work. But all of these have a neurological advantage because the load is so damn heavy. The load is just through the roof. So the nervous system has to get really good at recruiting a lot of motor units all at once. So it's great for strength. However, if you are a competitive lifter, you don't just need the strength at the top. You need to get those adaptations at the bottom and in weaker areas. So it doesn't mean you're just doing this, but you will start to get your nervous system primed as you get closer to a meet by biasing towards this type of work because there is value to it. But you'll also be taking your weak points and getting heavy with those as well. So this is kind of the spread of the type of barbell specific variations you could use. There are of course more. There are not bonus points for going out and finding exotic exercises. You're not going to find like, oh my God, I found the one bench variation nobody knows about that just exploded everything. This is already more than you need. If any of you are trying to run through all of these, you're doing way too much. You're going to find a couple that you're comfortable with, you're familiar with, you know how to progress them. They're predictable. That's what you want. You want more predictability, not less. So there's got to be a balance between experimenting, but then retaining the things that work and paying them forward long term.
Like any lifter who needs recovery like they need oxygen, sleep is really important to me. So I was super excited to partner with Bare Mattress for this. As a stomach sleeper, sleeping on low quality mattresses would cause my back to droop and I would routinely wake up with low back pain. But ever since Bare Mattress paired me with their firm, king-sized hybrid elite mattress, I've been able to wake up feeling amazing and refreshed. Not only am I well rested from sleeping through the night, but I can even go into my morning workouts without feeling achy or brittle. And Bare Mattress also has a sleep quiz that takes all of the guesswork out of finding out which mattress is appropriate for you. Don't wait till you get the mattress to figure out if it suits your sleeping position or your preferences. Take the quiz and they will match you with the perfect mattress. Bare mattresses are also made with 3 premium foams designed to remove and push away unwanted body heat. I absolutely cook in the middle of the night and I hate being warm when I'm trying to sleep. So anything that wicks away heat and keeps me cool is absolutely a plus. The best part about all of this is that Bare delivers your mattress right to your door. With free shipping in the United States, the mattress comes rolled up in a box and is super easy to set up. I was actually able to pop this sucker up on my shoulder and get it upstairs in one go. If it makes you nervous to buy something you haven't tried yet, Bare has a 120-night sleep trial, so you get more than 3 months to make sure that you absolutely love it. If you don't, they pick it up for you and you get a full refund. I love my Bare mattress and I think you will too. If you're looking for a new bed, head to Bare now. Use baremattress.com/Alexander Bromley via the link below to get 30% off a Bare mattress plus $400 worth of sleeping accessories for free with your purchase. So click the link in the description and head over to the Bare site for more details.
So now let's break down some examples of when you might use this stuff because there's a bunch of trade-offs and there's a million different ways to incorporate it. So let's try to consolidate everything down into something that makes a little more sense. So let's start with just a novice, a basic novice. My 2 preferred methods for novices are 1, people that just go in and play because they like being in the gym and they want to try all the machines and they get kind of well-rounded following broad developmental splits from like bodybuilding magazines or whatever, and they get comfortable learning how to push, learning how their body moves, and getting a pretty well-rounded base. There's some positives to that. That's great. However, if you do want to transition to something else, it gets a little tricky to transition from that. Not to say it's hard. It needs some direction, some trial and error. The other one is like linear progression. Like here's a couple broad barbell lifts. Probably something I bias towards because it's easier to put isolation stuff at the bottom than it is to go from pure bodybuilding to barbell specific stuff. So I bias a little more towards that. Both perfectly valid. Many people have gotten good starting on both ends. But if you're a novice, the basic idea is we need some experience quick. We need some growth quick. We need to just get you to the point of like where a normal human being should be, not the sedentary fat shits that populate modern society today. And that's a pretty quick run if you're focused and you're committed. So squat, deadlift, bench, very simple, the backbone of like all linear progressions for a reason. They work well, but I still want people to be a little well-rounded. It's still an important time to experiment and get comfortable with other stuff. And there's a big premium on development. This is where you're going to establish the base. I always go back to the base and peak. That's your entire training journey. As a novice, you're focused on your base more than anything. And then that's also in individual cycles as a more advanced lifter. You'll start with more base type work and move to more peak or specific type work. So for novice, I want development and I want variety. So I'm going to focus on disadvantaged movements, specifically range of motion, time under tension, things that might even feel a little awkward at first that take you out of your comfort zone so you're not just doing the same thing every time. Now, it's important that novices contain this. It's one thing to go around on a bodybuilding split where just effort and the variety of movements can drive you forward. It's harder to do that with barbell stuff because of the reasons I mentioned in the last video about recovery. So you still want to contain it. Again, you want just enough variety to be around it, enough focus and consistency to see yourself get better. So limit it. I don't want novices doing 5 different barbell variations. So squatting is great. Front squat, one of my favorite broad developmental movements. It's going to force you to stay upright, more quad growth, upper back growth, in the beginning especially. If you can get comfortable under a front squat, squatting is going to be your favorite exercise. People that hate squatting probably need to go through a couple hard front squat blocks, but it just does so many things with positioning. Great for general leg growth. Great for teaching how to enjoy a sucky movement. Deadlifts, RDLs, again, more disadvantage, pushing the hips back, hamstrings stretch more, teaches you to sustain posture under a load, under control, does so many great things. And then benching, like close grip's a solid one. Probably more right answers here. You could even say something like an incline bench maybe, but just enough variety to expose you to other things, but you can still easily progress those exercises and you don't need to worry about really changing them. Novices should probably spend more time picking a good amount of varied movements and then just progressing those for a long period of time until it's time to focus on something more specific. Intermediate, I'm not covering advanced at all because there's nothing I have to tell advanced lifters. The definition of advanced, we can talk around it about how much recovery they need or specificity, but really it's how good they are at whatever program they committed to early on. That's really what advanced lifting is. So don't think that there's something specifically that advanced lifters do. There's basic principles they might follow, but there's always exceptions, and it's really about how good they got at their thing. So keep that in mind because that tells you, get in somewhere. It's not about moving towards your idea of what advanced lifters do. It's about doing what advanced you would do, which is just how good you get at whatever you committed to. So intermediate, let's say powerlifting is very specific. We're focused on a specific end. We have meet dates we have to prep for. We have weaknesses we have to target. The movements we select have to carry over to what we do on the platform. So this is more specific. So it's kind of cool because our decision making is confined a little bit. It gets a little monotonous though, because we are so focused on developing just those three things, but also we're on a deadline and that can mess things up a little bit. So again, trade-offs. Now, if you're squat, deadlifting, benching, there's so many splits you could put this on, but this is beyond the scope of this video. In the beginning, again, base building, if you start a 20-week, 16-week macro cycle, knowing you have a meet in 4 months, you're gonna start getting your toe in the water, developing, getting comfortable under the weights again, building up some volume, and it's all going to bias towards hypertrophy and getting comfortable in awkward positions. So you don't just do your contest setup. Assume you have a contest squat, high bar, tempo squats. I'm seeing that pop up a lot with a lot of competitive lifters, forcing yourself to control the eccentric, forcing yourself to pause at the bottom. And safety bar is a good disadvantage one as well, similar to a front squat, but you can definitely typically handle a bit more weight there, a little more specific to the squat. So that's a good kind of base type list of exercises that will get somebody's foot in the water. And then so many blocks down, so many weeks or months down, you might transition. You're like, okay, now I got 8 weeks until my meet. I need to get specific to that 1 rep max with my squat, which means targeting weak points, means dealing with overload, means getting comfortable with the movement. So the variations you do use will be more specific to your squat and how you squat. So you're less likely to be doing high bar if you're a low bar squatter. You're less likely to be doing front squats as opposed to just some variation of your low bar squat. But also you want it to get heavy to mimic the weights. So broad and disadvantage to specific and advantage. So you might end up switching to low bar squat, box or pin squat to really handle some load, or maybe some heavyweight paused to make sure that your drive out of the hole is really good. And it all depends on you. And again, you're not going to do 4 different variations in a workout. It's pick 1 to 2. It's going to be specific to you. And that's something you can only really experience with trial and error. Deadlifts, again, stiff leg deadlift, Romanians, good mornings, very broad, very focused on broadly developing the erectors, the back, the glutes, and the hamstrings, and getting that hip hinge nasty. And then you can transfer that. And you do that on top of your regular ass deads, by the way. And then you transition to specific stuff, getting good at those movements you have trouble with. If you suck off the ground, heavy deficit deadlifts. If you suck at the knee, you might do block pulls or pause at the knee. Or if you just want to expose yourself to some load, you might do block pulls. And then similarly with bench, wide in tempo, developmental, heavy towards a meet, board, floor, paused at key moments, really getting comfortable with the contest commands. So that's what a specific block looks like generally, very, very broadly. General development is kind of cool because we can use these principles, but we don't need the dimension of going broad to narrow. We don't give a shit. We're still going to vary base strength and peak strength. Talk about that a lot. Part of what works about periodization isn't really how we think phase potentiation works, where we have to do this in one block, then we go into this in the next block. Like that all helps with leading to the meet. But really long term, it's the variety that matters. You get good long enough to where it stops working so well, and then you roll into something else that's effective, but also kind of new. So you can just focus on, if you're a power builder type, yeah, you might do heavy bench squat dead, heavy overhead pressing, but you don't have to follow this very specific periodized template. You can go through blocks or periods of training where you work in a particular threshold. You can populate it with what you think you need for your developmental goals. Let's say you want your quads bigger. Well, maybe I want to front squat more. Or, maybe I am chasing that big deadlift. You have more flexibility, and maybe I'm going to do something more specific to that. But you define your blocks based on what you need, how much volume you're going to do. High volume, okay. More hypertrophy stuff, okay. More disadvantage work, okay. And then you're going to do that, and then you might keep it the same and just change some movements. You might keep the movements the same and just change the thresholds. There's a lot of options, almost too many options. But the cool thing is these principles work. You're just not on the hook for that directionality. Focus on perpetual development over ever increasing specificity. So you don't always have to go broad to narrow. You can move back and forth. You can take your liberties with your variations based on your specific goals. And that's something a coach might help you with, because there might be ones that are more suitable for you based on your anthropometry, your leverages, where you've been weak in the past. And also, you don't want to just find those and spam it. Like if you do have a stick point at your shin with a deadlift, and paused deadlifts kind of help with that, that doesn't mean you just do paused deadlifts forever. The idea is to have kind of a holistic approach that cycles through, that changes from prioritizing to deprioritizing things as you move everything up. And it sounds complex, but it is. You'll build an intuition. It's not as complex as it might seem right now. You just need the information to gel, to process. And as you start applying it, it will make sense and you'll get an intuition. This is not something a textbook or flow chart can tell you. This is you acquiring information, and it's a river that's moving that you got to paddle. You don't have time to stop. You just got to figure out how to change direction. This is me in a kayak. You can tell how many times I've been in a kayak. You just need to figure out how to navigate and course correct as you go in real time. Going back is not an option, and that's fine. Just keep that in mind and hedge your expectations. So this is all I got for today, guys. Let me know what you think. Comments in the comments section. Thank you so much. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.